We call it the 4 Ps, and that stands for power, purpose, people, and prosperity. And so power is like, am I physically taking care of myself? Am I mentally, spiritually taking care of myself? What do I want it to look like down the road, 10 years? And then what am I doing in the next 90 days to get there? Purpose is like, where do I feel like my greatest impact is to the world? People is my relationships with my family, my team, my community. And then prosperity is like, how do we think about how we can all prosper? Some people, like maybe it is financially prospering and making more, but some people it's like, I want freedom of time.
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry look like to you? I'm Katie Polson, a dental hygienist and your host.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to another episode of Growth in Dentistry. I'm Katie Polson. It's January 2022, and we are continuing our discussion on kickstarting 2022 off on the right foot. And today our focus is on team management. But before we get started, I wanted to again ask you to please join our Facebook Dental Intelligence community and come join like-minded people. There's some great discussion on there. And ask other people questions. It really is just a great place to learn and grow from one another. And I'd also ask you to please go and rate and review this podcast like I do every time. I'm going to introduce my co-host today is Steve Jensen. He is you're at Greater New York meeting, right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm at Greater New York right now. Uh-huh.
Yes, so he is in New York. I'm very jealous. In his hotel room. So we're so grateful to have him, and he's going to introduce our guest today.
Well, I'm grateful to be here, and I'm thrilled to introduce our guest. And Josey, by the way, I saw you sent over a little blip, so I'll use a little bit of that, but I don't know that I needed it. Josey, who's joining us today, is honestly one of my favorite people in dentistry. She is not only one of the best humans on the planet, but she is also one of the brightest people in the space. Josey has helped lead a DSO and grow it up to the point where they sold it. Josey moved on from that and actually came and worked with us at Dental Intel for a little while before going and starting her own company, Traction for Dental and Joyful People. Most recently, Josey's both of her companies were acquired by DEO, which we're very excited about for her and what that means for the DSO space. I'll just say this, there aren't very many people out there that when they find a problem can, number one, think through solving the problem, and then number two, actually like fix it. And Josey is one of those people who not only is she a brilliant thinker, but she's also a brilliant doer. And I've always appreciated about Josey. She gets stuff done. And if there's anyone that's looking for direction for their group, or how can we really put systems in place to scale so that not only our business stays happy, but also our people stay happy, Josey and her team and the team over at DEO are the absolute perfect people to partner with and start engaging with. So with that being said, I will share that Josey shared this with me, and she said she has one goal, and that is to make work a joyful place to be. And with that, I'll introduce Josey Sewell.
Steve, thank you so much. You forgot to mention that we live like only 5 doors down.
Oh yeah.
I bought my house because Steve was a really great salesman. I was looking at another neighborhood and he convinced me to come to this one. And so anyway, it's really amazing. Steve, if you could maybe I'll just listen to that recording because you made me feel really good. So thank you so much.
I know that was very, very high compliments, and I'm very, very excited to be able to talk to you today. So we're talking again about team management, and as I was preparing ideas and thoughts, and I asked Steve, who should we have on to talk about this? He immediately thought of you. So with your extensive help with teams and being obviously a team member yourself as a hygienist, I don't say previous, I always say continued, because people say that I'm like, oh, I'm not, I still am. So how much does planning ahead affect team management, do you think, and what can people do to do that?
So I think that planning ahead, one, is really important for the business and for the owners so that they can make appropriate goals. Setting achievable goals, as you guys know, is really important, because sometimes if we don't plan ahead, or if we just set these big giant goals that are not achievable, it can be really demotivating to a team. But what we're finding from what's happened across even the world in the last couple of years, and everybody's talking about this thing called the Great Resignation, is that employees have had enough of maybe some bad management practices, or not feeling like their work matters or like they matter, and they are searching for places to find clear direction, to find purpose, to find people who care about them and who are willing to develop them and to pour into them. And they're willing, you know, while we've seen wage increases increase, absolutely. What we are also finding is that people just are really looking for a place that, again, they matter, their work matters, and that somebody cares about them and is willing to help grow and develop them.
Yeah, really great. See, do you have anything before I pop in?
Go for it.
Yeah, I really love what you said there. Specifically, just it really does help to plan ahead. And the thing that I really took out of that was setting attainable goals. Sometimes we definitely see that here at DI. So many people will set a goal and it's so big and it's totally, it just makes the whole team feel like, well, what's the point of even trying? You know what I mean? So I love that. I love being able to set your goals so that your team feels like you can hit them, which is really helpful. What can practices do you think, to plan or to have a successful team for the year 2022? I know a lot of people they don't spend very much time thinking about their team before. And so what have you seen to be successful?
So, you know, a couple of things, like one, recognizing that while sometimes it's very easy to blame a team that's underperforming on the team members, when in fact taking responsibility as a leader and owner and really starting asking questions like, have I set really clear expectations for my team, and how I want them to behave and what their performance looks like and how their performance is a part of the overall plan. And so that's important. And then taking historical information and being able to understand that historical information so that they can, again, create those more attainable goals and reverse engineer it. So for example, when I was on the executive team of a DSO in our infancy, we would set these giant goals and be like, we're going to do 20 million in revenue this year. And yet we hadn't taken into consideration, how many doctors do we have? How many patients are they seeing? What is their production per visit? And so we did this like top down kind of shove it and try to, you know, force it to work, which caused us to burn out our team rather than taking a bottoms up approach. And that's what I love. Actually, I still use the DI formula all of the time when I'm talking to people. Visits and production per visit in particular, you know, how many patients are they seeing? What has been their production per visit? What are those few little levers that we can use to create, again, more realistic expectations? Aside from having clear expectations on metrics and goals and KPIs, which are critical, and making sure that we're tracking those and doing everything we can to meet those, it's also so much about vision and core values. And so, you know, again, what people are looking for is purpose, and we can give them purpose through having a very clear company vision in who we are and why we do what we do and what we're trying to accomplish. So that's important, but also core values. Many people think that they have core values, but this is one of my favorite things to do with teams, is that, like, to me, clinical excellence is not a core value, right? That's an expectation. And so core values are an essential set of guiding principles that really help our team understand their behaviors. And so I would always, if you have a vision, if you have core values and you have KPIs, you have the three major components in order to create a healthy team. And so giving them purpose, right, with your vision, helping them understand what their behavior is needing to be or what we want, how we want them to behave with the core values, and then the performance expectations. The other thing that people are really, really missing, especially in dentistry, is we use this term office manager, right? And so, but it's not standard across the industry what an office manager does. Many office managers are insurance experts, and they're focused on revenue cycle, and they're focused on collections and things like that. But, you know, Gallup has done a lot of research to say that the variance in team engagement from somebody being not engaged to being actively engaged comes down directly to the manager. So having managers that they don't have to be the experts in insurance. That's for an insurance coordinator, but they are experts in leading, managing, and coaching people. And so that's what we talk about a lot in our programs is how do I connect with people? How do I measure their progress? And then how do I coach them?
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. And I was writing notes just to make sure we don't lose it. So let's start with the clear expectations there, because again, setting clear expectations is huge. And it's one of those things that we talk about a lot at DI. But people don't know where you're going if you don't set clear expectations. I mean, if they're just going to show up to work every day and do the same thing that they've always done. And a lot of dentists, I'm making a generalization here, but a lot of dentists are very non-confrontational. So they'll sit there and stew, right? So mad that nobody is doing what I want them to do, but they just
never told them what I need them to do.
Yeah, they've never set their clear expectations. So yeah, really great. Second is a bottoms-up approach, which is what I wrote. I love that idea of looking at historical data, which is what we're hugely a big fan of here, and measuring like, okay, what we had a really great year in 2018. What did we do? How did we do that? So that's really great. What are some ways that you think that you've seen people, just to get a little bit more detailed on that bottoms up approach, if somebody wanted to maybe look at the historical data and say, how do I actually do that? What does that look like to you?
It depends on the size of the organization.
Right.
Obviously, for DSOs, it's going to be a lot more complicated. If I have 20 locations, how am I going to manage that versus if I have 3
Right.
locations, and I can be more detailed with my process. But I think it's about, one, how can we simplify this as much as possible, right? And then how can I empower and engage and teach my leaders how to take this process and apply it to their office, right? So giving them, maybe it's a calculator, right, where they can plug in some provider information and historical information. And as they look through that, they can get some overall objectives, and then working with their regional manager, their executive team. So I would say as much as possible, like, how can you take a step back and simplify what is the few pieces of information that we need? And how can we leverage our team to help us build that? The other thing is, when I was talking about connect, measure, and coach, is I'm a huge advocate that rather than just telling people these are your goals, it's a matter of like being able to sit down and say, hey, Dr. Steve, like last year you produced $950,000 in dentistry. That's amazing. Look at how many patients you saw. This is the impact that you're making on the community. This is the impact it's made on our team and our practice. What's important to you? What do you think you can do next year? And so maybe Dr. Steve is saying, you know what, I'm doing implants, but I'd like to take an advanced course on implants, and I'd like to improve that. And I'd like to maybe start doing some ortho. I think I can do 1.2, right? And so when we leverage them and connect with their goals, one, it's our responsibility as a DSO. Our number one customer is not the patient. I've been like preaching that since before COVID, and nobody listened. And I think now with the Great Resignation, people are listening a little bit more. But our number one customer is our team. And so how can we connect with them and align their goals to our goals? And when we do that, I see time and time again that performance even exceeds what we think is possible, because people are excited, they're motivated, and they're bought in.
Yes, I love that. While you were talking, I was thinking of also what would it look like if you asked your team what their goals would be, what are their personal goals, personal family goals, or even goals at work. And maybe somebody really is not comfortable packing cord in your state, you can do that, or making a temporary crown, or they want to really learn how to use a CAD system to be able to do virtual impressions. There's so many things.
So Katie, you're talking my love language here. So we actually have a process that we've developed. And, again, my previous, like before we were in DEO, and we had a our program is called Joyful People. Joyful People is all about this. It's about engagement and connection with team members, but we have a process. We call it the Joyful Life Plan. And so we teach managers and anybody who has a direct report how to talk to their team member and find out what are their personal goals. We ask about, we call it the 4 Ps, and that stands for power, purpose, people, and prosperity. And so power is like, am I physically taking care of myself? Am I mentally, spiritually taking care of myself? What do I want it to look like down the road, 10 years? And then what am I doing in the next 90 days to get there? Purpose is like, where do I feel like my greatest impact is to the world? People is my relationships with my family, my team, my community. And then prosperity is like, how do we think about how we can all prosper? Some people, like maybe it is financially prospering and making more, but some people it's like, I want freedom of time. So we have those conversations with team members and encourage that, and then following up on it. And so that's when it really that's magic, and what happens when a manager do that with a team member.
And I love the idea of doing it right now in January, beginning of the year, because we've talked about this on previous episodes of the podcast, and we've done a webinar on it, on how sometimes your teams are motivated by different things. And if you just ask them, like financially, I'm motivated, but maybe it's time off, you know what I mean? And depending on, maybe you want to reward your team this year and you just don't know what to do. Maybe it's their gift is a pedicure or something, and just by asking them that, and having their goals go along with their reward, I really think that is super powerful. Thank you so much for sharing power, purpose, people, and prosperity.
Got it.
Yeah. Really great.
No, can I chime in here, Katie?
Yep.
And Josey, I'm going to ask you a question. So I do. I exist still. So as I was listening, I was picturing asking those types of questions to team members. Now, I haven't used the same words, but recently I had an experience where just a couple months ago, I asked one of my team members, we were lifting together, we would become friends. And I said, hey, like, honestly, what are your goals for your career in your life? He was doing business development with me. And he shared, that he was interested in getting more into sales and sales leadership and stuff like that. And it was the first time that I had a team member share that what they're doing now is not exactly what they want to be doing in a year from now or 2 years from now. So I think it's important to bring up the fact that, outside of even your associate doctors, your hygienists, your people who are working front office, assistants, you might ask them questions about, what are some of your goals for your purpose and power and prosperity and people. And it might not be necessarily what you want them to be doing forever in your practice. I think a lot of doctors wish that an assistant could just stay their assistant for 50 years and a hygienist could just stay their personal hygienist for 50 years. And so if you don't mind, Josey, sharing a little bit, what do you do as a leader when those things come up in those conversations? Because once a team member shares information like that, they expect you to help them. They're trusting you as their leader to help them reach those goals or to help them achieve this new vision that they're sharing. So talk through that a little bit, because I think it brings up an interesting dynamic that you would face.
I'm so grateful that you brought this up, because this is something that in dentistry, we've done it wrong for a very long time, where many dentists graduate, they go into school and they think, oh, I'm just going to have this team for the next 25 years until I retire. However, dentistry attracts very ambitious people, first of all, and sometimes people don't grow up wishing and dreaming and thinking that they're going to answer the phone or do insurance for 25 years of their career. Lifelong employment is not a thing anymore. That was generations past when they had to stay in one place to get their retirement. However, millennials and Gen Z, they like to experience different things. It's more about their development. So retention is not the thing that we should be measuring our ultimate success by. And so we talk about coaching people up, in, or out. So up, into a new position, in their position, meaning they're just getting better over time, or out of their position, or even sometimes out of our company. And so, we have to recognize as leaders, do we only care about people when they work for us and it's convenient for us? Or do we care about people because it's our job to care about people and to leave them better, when they leave us, no matter if it's whatever type of exit it is from our company, are they better having been with us? And that's how we ultimately can determine if we're successful. And so I love that you brought this up. So, I have a couple of great examples where when my hygienist, I was, clinical hygienist for the first part of my career, and then I was in executive leadership. When I would have these conversations with hygienists, many of them would be timid or worry, like if they had desires outside of clinical hygiene. However, like what type of leader would I have been if I was a hygienist in an alternative career and leadership and was like, keeping them, holding them in a place where they didn't want to be, or I couldn't create a safe place for them to be open.
Mhm.
So for example, whenever I had a hygienist, she wanted to explore some different options, and she was very open, honest. And I always promise, like, even if you want out of clinical dental hygiene or out of like the practice, it's not going to affect your ability to grow here or your earning potential or whatever. Let's just be open about the fact about things that everybody else is hiding, and let's make our time together really worth it. And so, rather than her quitting and exploring different options, what we did is she couldn't decide, like, do I want to do product education? Do I want to teach? What do I want to do? And I said, are you interested in training? And she said, I'd kind of like to try that. And so her clinical schedule was 32 hours a week. So we had some extra time each week. And so what happened was I had her take off of my plate chairside training of hygienists. So when we onboarded somebody, when we had a performance issue, when we had we were trying to elevate our hygienists, I was able to delegate that to her, but I poured into her, I developed her, I grew her side by side with her. And so she felt like she was growing and developing and learning. She was also supporting other hygienists. Now, if it was a performance issue, I had the hard conversation, right? Like, hey, we're not meeting expectations. We're concerned about this. We need to take some steps, or else we're going to have some, more difficult conversations and decisions in the future. I'm going to bring Katie in, and Katie's going to be your coach and support you. She is here for you to help you, overcome. So that relationship was different, right? They could be very open and honest and get the coaching that they needed, while I handled some of like checking in and following up, and ultimately sometimes having to make a hard decision. But what was amazing is seeing her confidence grow, her skills grow. I got something off of my plate I just didn't have time for. And then what was amazing is later she was picked up by the Align team, and she would train other hygienists how to use the iTero as a wellness scan, and it opened up career opportunities for her. So anyway, I have several different examples of other hygienists that it was similar, but it starts, again, Steve, what you said, in that. So with that team member in particular, if they want to get into sales, it's not ultimately your entire responsibility to make that happen, but can you give them experiences or expose them to things that maybe they would not have if they hadn't had that conversation with you, so that maybe eventually they can get there, right? Sometimes it's a matter of even letting the sales leader know and letting them attend some meetings or some training, and they feel seen and heard and appreciated.
Yeah. Wow. That was some powerful. Thank you for bringing that up, Steve, and because obviously that was super helpful. I learned a lot. Specifically, it's okay to be open about maybe the fact that you don't want to be at that office for the remainder of your career, and that's okay. And also, it says a lot about if you're willing to train someone out, as you said, of your practice. What does that do for them? You know what I mean? You've empowered them. And the people that they surround themselves with, they'll say, oh, you want to get into this field? You should work for them. And then they'll refer to you, yes. Right? And so then you're getting great team members as well. So in my practice, and my dad is a dentist, my brother's a dentist, Josey, and we have so many of our team members which says a lot about their leadership, but they'll refer to us, their friends, to work there, but also they come to us as their dentist still, you know what I mean? And so it makes, yes, it does, because we've loved and trained them, right? And they become part of our family, and then they move on to things that work better for their life. So such great information.
I think also, real fast, sorry.
No, we're good. We're good.
With the DSOs, I mean, the more that we elevate and train and empower others, a DSO is always looking for great office managers, regional managers, hygiene leaders, whatever. And so the more that we can commit to that, the better off our team is, right? As we're elevating their talent and their commitment to us. And so I loved your point about referring others. There's a really great book. It's called The Alliance, and I think it's by Reid, Hoffman. But that one is good. And then the book Drive by Daniel Pink. Those two really created the foundation for us in our Joyful program and how we interacted with our team.
Great. Perfect. I will put those in the show notes for people to reference those if they want to. Before we move on to our last question, which we ask all of our guests, I wanted to just quickly touch on what you talked about with managers and the fact that they should become experts in their teams. This is something that I really am passionate about, just having studied workplace communication, how important it is that managers, a lot of times we just expect them to manage, but in dentistry, we expect our managers to manage the office. But in dentistry, we expect them actually to be the leaders of the office. And the dentist can just work, especially in a smaller practice. You know, the dentists just want to get in the mouths, they want to do their job, and they leave kind of the leadership, in air quotes for those that are listening, to the managers. And they are not equipped with the tools they need to be a leader. And so I love the idea of spending this time at the very beginning, like we've talked about, and really encouraging your team members, specifically your managers. How can I help you grow in your role here as a manager? What experiences, what education do you need so that you can be a better leader? If that's the role that you want the managers to do, then we need to be training them. So such great information. I wanted to make sure we didn't move on from that. Do you have any follow up with that, and any advice on how managers can be leaders, or courses that they could take, or anything like that?
I mean, it's going to be a shameless plug, but our Joyful People program actually teaches how to lead and manage others. And so it talks about how to have conversations, how to align, vision and values, how to connect with them. So that was something that we recognized was missing. So some of this came from, I was what we call the director of people or culture in my organization, and we had 200 team members, and I had like 25, 26-year-old women who were leading practices that were $4, $5, and $6 million in production every year. And I had very high expectations. They need to manage the P&L. They needed to create positive team culture. I expected them to grow every year. I expected them to provide, have an amazing patient experience. I also expected them to help our dentist and kind of manage the day-to-day with our dentist. And I realized it was very tough for me to figure out how to enable and empower these young leaders with, some of them a little bit of life experience, or not a lot of life experience, or not a lot of education, particularly in how to manage people. And so I just tried to systemize as much as possible. I tried to take my brain and what I knew about people, and how can I create something where they don't have to go and read these hundreds of books that I've read, or the thousands of hours in podcasts, or the mistakes that I've made. How can I give them the building blocks and the system so that they can be really successful? So first, it started with a 13-week office manager training where I started really, really high level. And then it got really down into the nuance of what it meant to be a leader. And each week it was focused on, this week you're going to learn about finance, and then you're going to learn about HR compliance, and then you're going to learn about hard conversations, and you're going to learn about, all of these different things. And so we took some of the best of that and built it into our Joyful People program, so that if people will just follow it, and they will commit to it, they will be better off as leaders and managers, and able to create an engaged, happy, healthy team. For me, everything comes back to team health, and that's it. I psychologically feel safe at work, that my work matters, that I have positive relationships, because we see all of the other stuff improve when we manage those few things. So
Yeah.
that's
Great.
what our joy.
Thank you so much for expanding on that, and we'll again put links to that in our show notes. So to our last question, we ask the same question to every guest. Again, because growth is personal, it can mean so many different things to different people. So what do you think growth in dentistry looks like to you?
To me personally, or to the industry?
Either. Yeah.
So I think that for me personally, I'll take that side first, and then I'll talk about growth in the industry. Is we are at the DEO, and with my businesses and my programs, we are doing everything that we can to support leaders and dentists and help them learn the things that maybe they didn't learn in school, like business and people and all of those things. So we are creating a framework or an operating system specific to dental. And so what does growth mean for me? It means that we can create this framework, that it's accessible to people in the industry, and then it helps decrease their stress, increase their clarity and their confidence so that they can really live out their vision and make their greatest impact on their people and on their community. And so just like I talked about taking and systemizing some of those things for how do I manage people, we're creating and systemizing and creating simple solutions for people to grow their business. And so getting that out to the world, I think, is super important to me and my growth and what I can offer, and working with my amazing partners at DEO. And then for the industry, I think that we're going to really start to see this shift where the patient is not the number one customer, but the team is. And so as we really focus on our team, I think that's where the growth happens, and that's where our impact happens. Because if people are happy at work, they're engaged in what we do, and we're aligned on a common purpose, we can change the industry overnight. And I'm really excited to see how, when we focus on our teams, what happens to the business.
Great. Super great. Oh, Steve, I'm so glad you were able to get her on. I learned so much. So good, so good, so good. Well, this has been Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast. Again, special thanks to our lovely guest, Josey. You can find her. Where do you want people to find you at if they want to reach out?
So on Instagram, you can find me at Hygienist in Heels or Dental Operating System. My email we can include, it's jsewell, JSEWELL @deodentalgroup.com, or just on any of our social channels, DEO or Dental Operating System.
Perfect. I will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here. Again, thank you to, you can also find those by visiting our webpage at dentalintel.com. Thank you to Steve Jensen for joining me today from New York, and to our marketing department for all of their work on this podcast. I am Katie Polson. Keep growing.